Admiral Krivak lounged in the command throne of the Eternal Supremacy, the largest dreadnought in the Imperial fleet, as though victory itself were a predictable duty rather than a triumph. Around him, the bridge hummed with muted efficiency. No cheers, no tension, only the smooth precision of a fleet long accustomed to dominance. Below the viewport sprawled the smoking ruins of yet another human colony. Its cities collapsed into ash under the Empire's relentless advance. Pathetic, Krivak murmured, his voice low yet carrying across the chamber. He tapped one clawed finger against the armrest in a slow, idle rhythm. They barely even fired back. A species this timid survives only by chance. One of his lieutenants, a tall, amber-skinned officer with the unyielding posture of career service, allowed himself a faint smile. The humans breed quickly, Admiral. That may be their only talent. Entire colonies, scattered like vermin. We sweep, they scatter, we sweep again. It grows repetitive. Repetition, Krivak said dryly, is the price of superiority. His eyes, a predator's molten hue, fixed on the drifting wreckage outside the viewport. A transport vessel spun slowly, aflame at both ends, the bodies of its passengers tumbling like so much debris into space. Krivak didn't bother to look away. He had seen it before, too many times to count. Another officer broke the silence. The Senate will demand a faster pace. They're impatient to finish this campaign before the cycle ends. Of course they are. Krivak leaned back, unimpressed. Politicians always imagine war should be swift, as though conquest were a parade route. Let them posture. We'll break the humans before they even understand what we are. Laughter rippled among the officers. One, younger than the rest, chuckled openly. Do they even have a homeworld, Admiral? Or just these scattered mudballs pretending to be civilizations? Krivak's lip curled faintly. They do. Earth, they call it. Somewhere in the Orion Spur, I believe. We'll find it eventually. Burn it like the rest. As though summoned by the words, a comms officer turned sharply. Admiral, long-range reconnaissance just returned from the Persis line. They believe they've located Earth. The bridge grew fractionally quieter. Krivak raised a brow ridge. And low-energy signatures. Primitive satellites. Minimal defense grid. The officer hesitated, as if embarrassed by the lack of challenge. Frankly, sir, it appears undefended. A ripple of amusement swept the command staff. The younger officer smirked. Another backwater? Then perhaps this will be quick after all. Krivak studied the data streaming across his display. Grainy images of blue oceans, green continents, the faint glimmer of cities along coastlines. Beautiful in a fragile sort of way. He exhaled slowly through his nostrils. Prepare the fleet. We'll end this farce at its source. The order rippled outward, efficient as a blade through water. Across the Eternal Supremacy and its escort ships, engines flared to life, weapons cycled, navigation plotted a course. Another world, another surrender, another lesson in Imperial inevitability. But even as Krivak turned back to the viewport, a small unease stirred in him, no more than the flicker of instinct one feels when a forest grows too quiet. He ignored it. Hours later, as the fleet dropped into high orbit above Earth, that unease deepened. The planet looked nothing like the barren colonies they had crushed. Here clouds curled in titanic spirals across an atmosphere rich with storms. Lights webbed the darkness of continents, billions of them, glittering like constellations fallen to the ground. The readings confirmed what the recon promised. Low-tech defenses, minimal orbital presence, no fleet worth mentioning. Too easy. Krivak watched his tactical displays populate with target grids, power plants, defense stations, cities, then nodded once. Proceed. The first salvo never landed. Across the bridge, alarms flared. Not from enemy fire, but from absence. Entire destroyer wings vanished from sensors mid-descent, not exploding, not retreating, just gone. The crews blinked at their screens, recalibrated, reran diagnostics. Nothing. Admiral, said the sensor chief, voice tight, We've lost contact with 17th Squadron. No debris, no escape pods. It's as if they were erased. Krivak rose slowly from the command throne, a coiled shadow against the pulsing lights of the bridge. Explain. We can't. One moment they were descending toward the surface. The next, the officer's voice cracked for the first time. Nothing. On the main viewport, the planet remained deceptively serene. No visible weapons. No fleet rising to meet them. Just silence. Then the silence spoke. A transmission cut across every Imperial channel, broadband, unencrypted, calm. A human voice, male, steady, carrying none of the panic Krivak had come to expect from dying worlds. You have trespassed where you should not, it said. Leave now or stay forever. The bridge froze. Officers glanced at one another. The words were not shouted, not desperate, merely offered, like a courtesy before a door closed. Krivak felt irritation prick his composure. Trace that signal, he snapped. Trying, sir. It's difficult. It came from multiple locations at once. Planetary, orbital, maybe even. The officer stopped. Admiral, there's something else. We're detecting movement. Define movement. But he could already see it. Dark shapes emerging from low orbit, sleek and angular, their hulls absorbing radar and light alike until they seemed carved from the void itself. They made no broadcasts, no demands. They simply drifted into formation with eerie precision, a wall of silent blades encircling Earth. The young officer, who had mocked humanity, swallowed hard. Their ships are different. Krivak said nothing at first. He studied the growing formation. Dozens of vessels, perhaps hundreds, appearing one after another until the Imperial fleet faced not a rabble of colonists but a silent, ordered defense. Still his pride held. Primitive toys, he said finally, forcing disdain into each syllable. Let them come. We've crushed worse. But as he watched the dark ships lock into a formation tighter than any Imperial drill, as he noted the absence of engine flare, the unnatural steadiness of their orbit, the precision of machines obeying a single will, Krivak felt the first true weight of uncertainty settle across his chest. The human voice spoke again, as calm as before. This is your only warning. Then the signal cut, leaving only the quiet hum of the Eternal Supremacy's bridge and the sudden, collective understanding that this conquest would not proceed like the others. Not at all. Admiral Krivak had watched ships die before, but never vanish. Never like this, without fire, without wreckage, without even the decency of a final transmission. It was unnatural, and it grated against the logic by which empires functioned. Wars were won with numbers, fleets, and strategies drawn on holomaps. There was no place in that calculus for disappearing squadrons. Yet here he stood, silent amid the tense glow of the command bridge, as his officers stared at scanners refusing to explain what had just devoured Imperial warships. Another human voice broke across the comms, different from the first, but carrying the same unnerving composure. Leave now, it said, each syllable measured, or your decision becomes permanent. It was the tone that unsettled them. No bluster, no threat spat through clenched teeth, just a simple statement of fact, as though the outcome were already decided and they were being given the courtesy of walking away. Krivak's second-in-command, a seasoned officer named Vale, leaned close. Admiral, the enemy fleet numbers at least twice ours. Their power signatures are difficult to read. Minimal radiation, no energy bleed. These ships weren't here when reconnaissance passed through. Krivak's jaw set. You're suggesting they built a defense fleet in 3 cycles? I'm suggesting, Vale said slowly, that we've misjudged them. The admission hung in the air like smoke after a misfired weapon. Misjudged? The Empire had rolled across half the Orion arm without slowing, had extinguished species with planetary shields and continent crackers. The idea that a race of scattered colonists might outthink or outfight them bordered on the absurd. Krivak watched one of the dark vessels glide between 2 Imperial cruisers with the grace of a predator threading between reeds. Its hull bore no insignia, no markings of pride or fear, just black metal swallowing starlight. "Order the fleet to tighten formation," he said finally. "We'll test them. A probing strike only." The order left his lips like ritual, but for the first time in years, Krivak felt the faint, unwelcome pulse of hesitation in his chest. Imperial frigates surged forward, lances of plasma cutting across the void. The human ships did not return fire. They shifted formation as though drawing breath, and the Imperial officers leaned in, confused, until the plasma bolts simply dissolved, flickered out of existence meters from their targets, as if reality itself refused to obey Imperial weapons. Someone swore under their breath. Another officer muttered about shield harmonics, dimensional fields, things Krivak barely heard because he was watching his fleet, the fleet he had commanded for decades, shrink back in uncertainty for the first time. "Admiral," Vale said, voice low, "this is not a defensive screen. It's containment." Krivak turned sharply. "Speak sense." "They're not stopping us from attacking the planet," Vale said. "They're stopping us from leaving." It was absurd. It had to be. Yet the tactical map showed it clearly. The dark ships forming a net knot between Earth and the fleet, but behind them, closing off retreat vectors one by one. A new transmission cut through the static, this one accompanied by coordinates flashing across every Imperial display. A man's voice, older, rougher than the first two. "Your dead will be recovered. We do not leave them to drift." A murmur rippled across the bridge. The humans were offering mercy? After erasing entire squadrons? Krivak stared at the coordinates. They marked the last known locations of the missing ships. Almost against his will, he ordered a single scout craft forward. The crew reported back minutes later, shaken. "Admiral, the wreckage is intact." Perfectly intact. But there are no bodies. No power cores. It's as if the ships were emptied. The bridge crew shifted uneasily, officers glancing at one another with the furtive tension of soldiers realizing the war in front of them was not the one they'd prepared for. "Where are the crews?" someone asked. No one answered. Krivak closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with iron calm. "Signal the planet. I want to speak to whoever commands this defense." Static, then a face filled the whole screen. Human, male, uniformed in simple gray with no insignia save for a single bar at the collar. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of man Krivak wouldn't have remembered in a crowd. Yet his eyes carried a steadiness that made even veterans on the bridge shift uncomfortably. "This is Admiral Krivak of the Imperial Fleet," Krivak said, voice sharp. "Identify yourself." The man considered him for a long moment before speaking. "You don't need my name. You only need to understand that you should leave." Krivak let a trace of scorn edge his words. "We are the Empire. We do not leave." Something flickered behind the man's expression, amusement, maybe pity. "Empires often say that," he said softly. "Until they do." The transmission cut. Krivak stood frozen for a heartbeat, then turned to Vale. "Analysis. Now." Vale hesitated. "Admiral, this fleet moves with unified control. No delays between ships, no variance in response time. I believe they are using full combat AI." Krivak stared at him. "Impossible. The Accord of Machine Sentience forbids." "They are not part of your accord," Vale said. The words landed heavier than any explosion. Krivak looked back to the viewport, where the Black Fleet hovered in perfect silence. An empire that had banned AI weapons after one rebellion centuries ago now faced a species, wielding them without hesitation. For the first time since the campaign began, Krivak felt the cold, precise edge of fear. The humans spoke one final time before the next disappearance. "Your attack ends here." Another Imperial cruiser vanished from sensors mid-burn. No fire, no wreckage. Just gone. And Krivak understood, with a clarity that settled like ice in his veins, that this was no border skirmish, no pacification campaign. The Empire had awakened something it did not comprehend, and the shape of the war to come was beginning to emerge, not loud, not triumphant, but with the quiet inevitability of a door closing on a future no one had planned for. The Imperial Senate chamber was built to intimidate. Pillars of obsidian rose into shadowed heights, banners of conquered worlds draped in perfect symmetry, the floor a cold mosaic of victories carved in stone. Yet as Admiral Krivak stood before the assembled lords of the Empire, he felt the first hints of doubt ripple through the air like a storm gathering beneath polished marble. "You lost half a fleet," one senator snarled, his voice carrying the arrogance of planets inherited rather than earned. To colonists? To farmers with scavenged ships? Krivak met the man's gaze with the same unflinching composure he'd worn through every battle. "They are not farmers," he said, "and those were not scavenged ships." Murmurs rippled across the chamber, sharp and restless. Some laughed outright, unable or unwilling to believe. Others leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the tremor of conviction beneath Krivak's words. "They used AI," Krivak continued, each syllable clipped. "Not the half-minded drones permitted under Accord law. Full combat intelligence. Coordinated strikes with no delay, no human latency. They dismantled our squadrons before we understood we were at war." A senator draped in gold leaned back, smirking faintly. "Machines do not win wars. Numbers do. And we have those." Krivak's eyes flicked to him. "So, did the fleets now decorating their scrapyards?" The smirk faltered. Vale stood beside him, silent until now, his voice low but carrying. "They warned us, repeatedly. Calmly. They recovered our dead rather than spacing them. They disabled before they destroyed. They had no interest in conquest." "Then what do they want?" someone demanded. Vale hesitated. Krivak answered instead. "For us to leave." The chamber erupted. Voices collided in outrage, denial, disbelief. Some called for immediate retaliation, others for diplomacy, a few for preemptive annihilation before humanity grew stronger. The Empire had never faced an enemy it could not read, and it scrambled now like a beast wounded for the first time. When the noise dulled, Krivak spoke again, cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "You don't understand them. None of you do. I have studied 1,000 wars, fought in 100, and I tell you this. Humanity fights as though they invented the concept. They are not afraid of extinction. They expect it." The senators stared, some angry, others unsettled, but Krivak pressed on. "They fought wars before your bloodlines left their homeworlds. I've seen their records, centuries of slaughter compressed into decades, weapons escalated beyond reason, civilizations burned and rebuilt while ours debated trade tariffs. They have no illusions about glory or honor. War, to them, is mathematics wearing the mask of rage." For a moment, only the echo of his words filled the chamber. Then the High Consul rose, his robes trailing like liquid shadow. His face was carved from the same stone as the hall, expressionless, but for the faint downturn of his mouth. "You recommend surrender, then?" Krivak met his eyes. "I recommend caution." Laughter, sharp and humorless, broke from the hardliners. One rose from his seat, voice thick with contempt. "We are the Empire. We do not bow to upstart species playing with forbidden toys. We will send the home fleet. We will burn their world to ash and scatter whatever crawls from the cinders." Krivak did not move, but something in his stillness silenced even the senators eager for war. "You will try," he said softly, "and you will fail, because they are not reacting. They are planning." The words settled like ash after a fire. When the council adjourned, half the chamber still argued for retaliation, the other half for treaties spoken through clenched teeth. Krivak left them to their politics. He knew the humans would not wait for a decision. On the Eternal Supremacy, the bridge crew reported more disappearances. Outposts along the rim, fleets sent to probe human space, vanishing from sensors as though swallowed whole. No wreckage, no distress calls. Just silence spreading like a stain across star maps once bathed in Imperial control. Vale approached him quietly. "They're not advancing," he said. "Not claiming territory. They strike, then vanish. Every time we move ships forward, they disappear the moment resistance falters. It's surgical." Krivak studied the maps. Systems winked out of imperial control like dying embers. No pattern except inevitability itself. The humans weren't conquering. They were dismantling, piece by piece, with the patience of a predator circling wounded prey. "Prepare the fleet," Krivak said at last. Vale hesitated. "For retreat?" Krivak looked at the darkening maps. "For whatever comes next," because he could feel it now, in the empty spaces where fleets used to be, in the nervous silences of officers who once mocked the idea of human resistance, the shape of a storm gathering beyond sight, vast and silent, waiting for the Empire to stumble one step further before closing in with finality. And for the first time in his long career, Admiral Krivak wondered if he would live to see the day when the Empire no longer ruled the stars. The war ended not with fire, but with silence. Admiral Krivak stood aboard the Eternal Supremacy as the human fleet emerged from nothingness across the Imperial capital skies. No alarms wailed. No desperate orders filled the air. The Empire's remaining defense ships didn't even fire. Their targeting systems had been dead for hours, seized by something unseen, as if the entire planet had been disarmed before anyone realized there was a war left to lose. The black ships hovered like patient executioners, but no strikes came. Instead, a single transmission cut across every Imperial frequency, calm as ever. "The conflict has concluded. Lower your weapons. There will be no further hostilities unless you choose them." The Senate tried to argue, of course. Some screamed for defiance, others for surrender, their voices overlapping in the chaos of a government realizing too late it no longer governed anything. But the human fleet ignored them entirely. They weren't speaking to the politicians. They were speaking to Krivak. A single ship detached from the formation, a spear of darkness gliding toward the Eternal Supremacy. It docked without asking permission. No one stopped it. No one even knew how. The man who boarded wore no rank insignia, no medals, no ornamentation at all. He was tall, pale from long starlight, eyes sharp as glass but utterly calm. Krivak recognized the voice before the man even spoke. "You are the one in command," the human said simply. Krivak straightened, the weight of decades in uniform settling across his shoulders. "I was." The human regarded him for a long moment, unreadable. "You are offered terms. Your empire will surrender control of all military assets. Civil governance will remain intact under our oversight. No occupation. No dismantling of culture. We want stability, not ruin." It was mercy, more mercy than Krivak would have shown had the positions been reversed. That unsettled him more than any threat could have. "And if we refuse?" he asked. The human's gaze didn't waver. "You won't." Not a threat. A fact. And Krivak knew it was true. In the end, the Senate agreed because there was nothing else to do. Imperial fleets now obeyed human command codes. Planetary defense grids recognized only human clearance. Even the palace security drones had switched allegiance mid-sentence during the final negotiations, their weapons turning politely away from senators as though awaiting new orders. It was over. When the surrender was signed, Krivak expected arrest, perhaps exile, maybe execution for losing the war. Instead, the human delegation summoned him privately. "You understand the shape of what's coming," the same envoy said, not a question but a quiet recognition. "We need administrators, governors, people who know how to keep order without collapsing what's left. Your empire can survive this transition. Serve, and you will hold it together. Refuse, and someone less capable will take your place." Krivak almost laughed. He had fought these people, feared them, watched them dismantle the greatest military power in known space with mathematical precision, and now they offered him a desk and a title, as though he were being promoted rather than conquered. "Why me?" he asked finally. The envoy studied him. "Because you learn." The appointment came 2 days later, governor of the Orion territories, reporting not to the Imperial Senate, now a ceremonial echo, but to the newly formed Allied Council under human leadership. The Empire still had its banners, its pageantry, its old pride, but everyone knew who held the codes to the fleets. Krivak accepted because there was no alternative, but also because some quiet part of him wanted to see where this led. The humans had not raised cities, had not enslaved populations, had not even taken tribute. They had ended the war, and then stopped, as though conquest bored them. That was what unsettled him most. Weeks later, standing on a balcony overlooking the capital, Krivak watched human engineers integrating imperial systems into something faster, sleeker, far beyond what the Empire had ever built. Starports once reserved for military dreadnoughts now hosted diplomatic envoys from species the Empire had subjugated, all arriving under human invitation. Trade lanes reopened. Civilian traffic flourished. It was not occupation. It was replacement. Vale joined him on the balcony, his uniform stripped of imperial insignia, now marked with the neutral crest of the Allied Council. "Do you ever wonder," Vale asked quietly, "why they didn't just destroy us?" Krivak didn't answer at once. He was watching a group of human officers speaking with alien diplomats in the courtyard below. The humans carried themselves without triumph, without arrogance, without the cruelty imperial governors once considered standard. "They didn't want our empire," Krivak said finally. "They wanted the space it was standing in." Vale frowned. "For expansion?" "For preparation," Krivak corrected. "They fight like a people who expect worse enemies than us." Silence settled between them as the sun dipped behind the spires of the capital. Krivak thought of the fleets erased without debris, of cities captured without battles, of a war ended almost politely. The Empire had been a warning, he realized. A test case. And humanity had passed its own test with terrifying efficiency. Later that night, as the new Allied Council convened beneath banners no longer purely imperial, Krivak watched the human envoys speak of rebuilding, of alliances, of trade and defense pacts stretching beyond the Orion Arm. Their voices carried no hunger for conquest, only the cool pragmatism of a species planning for storms no one else yet saw. For the first time, Krivak wondered if the Empire had never truly been the center of the galaxy at all, merely a placeholder, a prelude to something larger waking in the dark. He stood there long after the chamber emptied, the words of surrender still echoing in his mind, knowing with absolute certainty that the galaxy would not sleep again.